Hey, what's up you guys? My name is Amber, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about Karma for Beginners by Jessica Blank. Before we get too far into discussing the book itself, I do want to mention a few trigger warnings that the book does involve, including mentions of physical assault, sexual assault, inappropriate relations and power dynamics, grooming, a minor participating in sex, the use of pot, and the use of acid. If any of these things are liable to be triggering or bothersome to you, please have discretion while watching the rest of this review or reading the book. So the book centers around Tess, a 14-year-old who's never really had much security in her life because her single mother is one of those like hippy-dippy fake woke folk who is constantly chasing after her latest whim. And the book starts with their latest move, where they end up at an ashram where they are staying for an extended retreat, which is kind of just like one of those yoga, meditation, spiritual kind of retreats, except instead of just going for the weekend, they're just living there now, which Tessa absolutely despises and her mother is thrilled about. Once they get there, the mother quickly adopts this new lifestyle and attitude that Tessa just doesn't really get, even though she wants to. So essentially the mother kind of just leaves Tess behind, literally and figuratively, pretty much just leaves her up to her own devices to do her own thing in a very anti-parent move. Tessa abandons her seva, which is like their daily mandated like job slash chore, when she meets a boy. And they start to develop a relationship despite the fact that she is 14, turned 15, and he is 20. It follows their relationship as Tess has this way of being able to get away from the ashram, and her mom, who becomes like increasingly more unrecognizable. Of course, this relationship is kept secret as Tessa pretty much develops her own new personality and her own sense of self, and the distance between her and her mom continues to grow until it finally gets to a point where they're both unrecognizable to each other, and the story felt, you know, whether or not they're going to be able to repair that or if there's no coming back. This is not actually my first time reading the book. The first time I read it was actually my sophomore year in high school. I definitely don't like it quite as much as I did back then because as an adult, I have a little bit more clarity as to the problematic scenarios that occur in the book. And I think part of why I liked it so much, and I still do like these aspects of it, is the relatability of it. You know, with Tessa being 14 and then turning 15, it definitely does follow the thought process of a teenager. And I do think that that is something that a lot of YA authors aren't able to grasp as well. I feel like most authors tend to be a little bit too far removed from that age range to really get how it feels to be in that age range, whereas I do think Jessica Blank does a really good job at expressing those thoughts and feelings. For me at least, there are a lot of relatable aspects because, like, you know, there is having like the absent father kind of deal, and then the strained relationship with the mother where like there is love there, but there's also just a personality disconnect, and then, you know, having a parent who is more immature than you would hope for being a parent is something that is definitely relatable for a lot of people. And then there's the matter of the relationship between Tessa and her newfound boyfriend. His name is Colin. It's really hard to explain the relationship because obviously as an adult looking at it, it is very highly problematic. But as you're reading, Tessa doesn't really get it. Like, she can comprehend the fact that it's technically illegal. She just doesn't care and continues to indulge in it. And I just think like her as a character isn't emotionally developed enough to be able to understand the full extent of the situation, which is understandable because she's like 14/15, you know, you're very young. And I can say this because I was that age recently enough to where I still remember a lot of the decisions I was making at the time. And God, I don't want to be one of those adults who's like, you think you know more than you do, but you kind of do. All right. So obviously there's this relationship. She meets a boy who works on the cars at the ashram. So he's not technically a part of this whole like yogi guru type of vibe. So he's an outsider and he understands how weird it is, and he's also the first person who has been nice to her the entire trip. So I understand the appeal on her end, and I struggle to understand the appeal on his end, like, because like I know at the very, very beginning, as part of the trigger warnings, I do mention grooming as being one of them, because like on paper that's what it is slash sounds like, but when you're reading the book, it's hard to tell how intentional or premeditated it was, because like it starts they're just being friends, and Tess just helps Colin work on some of the cars and be like a bit of assistance when he needs a second pair of hands, and it's very, very innocent until Tessa makes the first move and she kisses him, and they spend like an afternoon kind of making out and doing a thing, and then Colin addresses it the next day and is like, hey, like it's whatever, but like we can never do that again, and tries to explain like obviously that's not something that's okay. And then Tessa immediately like starts crying about it, and then Colin is like, fuck it, and they end up like making out again and then start this relationship, and I'm like, bro, you know it was wrong. You literally like acknowledged and was just like, homie, that can't happen again. And then immediately like all of your willpower is just gone. So it's really, really hard to figure out if the whole thing was more premeditated and intentional or just happened, because like at that point it wasn't like they had any like real connection or anything. Not that it's ever justified, but like I would be more understanding of it if they had been like really close friends and got along like topic well. Just like there are certain situations where it would be like still not okay, but like I can see how you got from point A to point B, whereas this one is kind of just like I don't. Then they start this relationship very, very quickly, like after Tessa turns 15, so obviously still very, very underage. So there's a 5-year age difference between the two of them, which, you know, if you're like older, like whatever, who cares, 5 years? I mean, more than my personal preference, but like whatever, I guess, if you're all like consenting adults. But as a child, that is such a huge age difference. I mean, I know the people that I was like into at age 15 were all definitely older, not quite as old as 20, but like I was definitely into the like 18-year-olds and all of the seniors and stuff like that. So I get the appeal, but also like I'm very, very grateful that most of the people that I were talking to who were older like understood that I was a lot younger. So obviously when I got older and got to that age, I was like, oh, I get it. And I'm very, very grateful for the people that I was friends with, except for the one fucker that I dated for a week. He was an asshole. It's kind of hard to read knowing that there is so much of that age difference and that there is such a difference in the power dynamic, because Colin really provides more of a sense of security and individuality for Tessa, because like he's the one with the car, like he's able to like drive them away from the ashram and like they go on their adventures and do their thing. The way the book is written, they definitely don't display it like it was a grooming situation or like it was really wrong. We don't know if Colin has a history of this because we don't really get much of his background at all in the book. Oh, and for clarification, they like very, very quickly into this relationship like start having sex. So it's like super, super illegal. Not only that, but just morally very, very questionable. I don't really see a huge point to the relationship other than just a means to an end of showing the huge disconnect between Tessa and her mom. And then, you know, it's more of a means to an end, like towards the end of the book. I don't want to like give away the ending, but Tessa has a chance to actually stand up for herself and like give her thoughts to her mom, and her mom is finally like actually listening to Tessa. So the whole relationship was kind of felt like more of a means to an end to get to that point. Like it definitely wasn't bad to read, and again, like I still enjoyed reading the book and would probably read it again, but the relationship is definitely uncomfortable as an adult, recognizing that that is morally wrong. Like maybe there is something that I'm kind of missing with the intention behind it, because there wasn't ever like a realization on Colin's end, like, oh, this is wrong, and there was never any ramifications, and by the end, like, they still believed that they were in love with each other, when that's definitely not what that was. So I find a little bit of trouble reading into any potential like theme behind that aspect of the book, and especially when it comes to showing that aspect and that kind of age range in a relationship. I feel like it's almost dangerous to have the book aimed at young adults without showing how wrong it actually is. Just the book doesn't really address that it's not okay and that it is very, very problematic. And I feel like, you know, reading it as a teenager, I probably didn't quite get it. Because, you know, when you're 15, you think like, oh, that's not that bad. But then like in your 20s, you're like, oh my God, they're a child. So I feel like reading it when I was younger, I don't know how much I would recommend that to other younger kids. Like if you're older, like maybe if you're a senior in high school, like if you're older, I think you are at the point where like you start to get it. But like I wouldn't want a 14 or a 15-year-old reading this book. Again, not to say that it's a bad book. I just think that if you're a young adult author, you need to be more careful about the topics and themes that you are presenting to young adults and how specifically you present those themes. And again, for anybody who is underage, who needs to hear this, if an older guy is into you for whatever reason, it's not because like you're just special. Like it's because there's something wrong on his end. That's not that there's anything wrong with you. Like it's not your fault. It's not anything. Like just for any underage girls who are talking to anybody 18 or over, just stop. Ghost them, block them, tell an adult, like legitimately, don't talk to older boys. Full send. Because I know when you're younger, it gives you that, like, it makes you feel special, and that it makes you think that like you're not like other girls, and that there's something special and unique about you that just makes them drawn to you. And you know, you may have a fantastic personality. There may absolutely be something that like people like are attracted to you, but the adult needs to be the one who knows how to say no, and who knows that there is too much of a power dynamic difference, not to mention the legal ramifications of it, you know, is on the adult. I know how nice it can feel, but it's not worth it. It's not worth anything that comes from it, because any relationship with that kind of power dynamic is not going to be a healthy or happy one. Not to mention, if anybody gets caught, like the amount of legal trouble you guys would get in. Just, I get it. And I'm, as an adult who's recently your age and who gets it, I want to be the one to tell you to stay the fuck away. Going back to the book itself, I think I enjoy it more with the relatability of the parental versus kid dynamics than I do anything else about the book. That being said, there is drug use in the book as well that is so accurately described. Well, to clarify, I've never personally used acid, so cannot verify, but the way that it's explained and described and like the visuals that you get when you're reading makes me feel like I know what they're talking about. Not even just in that aspect, just some of the descriptions that the book have are very, very vivid and interesting to read. And I would recommend the book to actual young adults, not teenagers, because I feel like most of the time when I read a young adult book, I recommend it for like high schooler and teenage, and I would not recommend that for this book. I would like literally, if you're a young adult, like if you're over 18, if you are graduated from high school, sure, go ahead and read the book. But if you are still in high school, if you are underage, stay away from this book. Or go into it knowing, like go into it reading for the relatability of the thought process behind it, but understand why it's morally wrong. I feel like after all of my ranting, it's not quite as relevant anymore, but this book is also very, very music reference heavy. The amount of different bands that were name dropped in this book, like, I have never ever read a book with so many music references, including books that are written by and about musicians. As a music heavy person, I thought that that part was really, really fast. Like, I'm always interested when books involve the mention of specific bands or songs, because it's a way to get more into the book and more immersed than you would be otherwise, because that's a really good way to like relate to it into the real world. I do also want to mention that the book does involve the use of the G slur, which for anybody who is unfamiliar, this term is actually used as a racial slur towards the Roma or Romani people, and what used to be very, very commonly used in Europe. Americans and here in the US, we didn't necessarily get that memo, so that is not commonly what the word is used as, but historically that is the context, and most Roma people are not fans of it being used. I do not think that it was used in the book with the intent of it being a slur. It was definitely used in the context that we are more familiar with it in the US, where it's just like the boho nomadic traveler, blah blah blah, like that bullshit. But just be aware that that is the historical context of the word, so try to like not use it in your day-to-day language. Thank you guys so much for watching. I had a blast hanging out with y'all. Peace.